Good day, Dale.
Hello, guys.
This is Dale, and this is Kris. And boy, it sounds good for one that's not running, right?
Well, it's fully choked.
Ah, okay. Okay, Dale's got some problem with his outboard, and we're going to take a look at it and get it all running good for him and show you guys how to do it. Tell me what's wrong.
Well, it's very difficult to start. Like you have to, like this morning, for example, it took 12 pulls, choke the whole time. And then once it starts running at low RPMs, you have to have it fully choked like this. And at low speeds, you got to choke the engine out. Would you like to see what happens when you push the choke in?
Sure.
It's going to surge.
Perfect.
Bleh. That can't be right.
It can't be right, but it's good because, you know, you've got a kill switch problem, so now you don't need to worry about the kill switch problem. Okay, well, when an engine doesn't run, you got to say what's going on. It's either not getting compression, which is real bad because that means something's broken inside, rings and stuff like that. Obviously, this one's getting compression because it's running. It's not getting spark, which usually on these boils down to a problem with the kill switch, and Dale's already had this problem and solved it himself by adding another switch. Or, and before he added the switch, it was fun because he would have to take a piece of metal and short out 2 wires, and you can tell he's been shocked before. There's actually very high voltage, so it's kind of fun to watch him poke at them. Or it's not getting fuel. And that's really all there is to it. And since this one's running, we know it's getting spark and compression. So a lot of our diagnosis is solved for us. It's not getting fuel. Now, there's a lot of ways it could not get fuel. It could just not get fuel at all, like the fuel tank's not hooked up properly. But again, it's running. There's basically there's filters, there's all kinds of things along the way. The fuel pump could be a problem, but not a problem here. So let's just talk about this one. This one's running like a champ at full speed. But when you try to start it or idle around and go slow, and that's particularly a problem in this bank because you have to idle everywhere. There's just boats everywhere. It's not running right. And he's fixed the problem by enriching the circuit by pulling the choke and adding more fuel. So that basically boils down to this. The carburetor has a high-speed system for applying fuel and a low-speed system for applying fuel. And obviously the low-speed part is kind of plugged up somehow. So if he applies choke, that enriches the circuit and it gets it working. But in this case, well, anyway, we're going to take carburetor off and clean it up and learn a few things about modern carburetors that are a little bit weird, but they make your life a whole lot better. All right, well, let's start out by taking the carb off. Okay, you've done this before, Dale. We had a high-speed problem before, and you took it off yourself, so why don't you start tearing into it? Oh, you brought carb cleaner, good. The big trick at this stage is drop nothing in the ocean.
I knew you would be back.
Oh, is that the one we... Oh, all right, okay. The carburetors on these 4-stroke motors are always on the left side. It seems they're always the left side. They'll always be on the side because you got to feed into the valve train, unlike 2-strokes. That's why they're so wide in their case. Anyway, this is the carburetor right here, from here up to here. This is a Mercury, which means it's a Tohatsu. A Tohatsu with stuff added on. And when you take these apart, it's very important not to lose these gaskets. They would love to jump in the ocean. Thank you. So Dale's taken the main bolts off, and he's taken the linkages off already for the choke and the throttle. And he just has to then take off the fuel line, and we'll have the carburetor in our hand. need pliers on this one? I've forgotten.
Not
Guess
that
not.
guy.
Okay, there we go. All right. That
Carburetor.
Carburetor. We've got the carburetor, and there's a gasket, a plastic spacer, and another paper gasket. Very important you don't lose these. I'll tell you that this plastic thing is really hard to fabricate a new one because I've lost one. We're going to take this up on the big boat now and take it apart and make it work. Well, here's a Tohatsu carburetor for a 15 horse motor. Let's see. Looks just like the one for the 8 and the 10, except it has this little accelerator pump, and this just pumps a little extra gas when you give it the throttle so it doesn't stammer for a second. It's not terribly critical that it works. But what is critical is that the main fuel passages work. So we're going to pop it apart now, take a look on the inside. This is the float bowl, and this is the bottom of the carburetor as it stands in the dinghy. This bowl, which I'm about to take off, is very important. It holds a little sample of fuel at exactly the right depth. Just the right, it's got to be like half-ish full. And that provides a very constant back pressure that the carburetor can work off of. So if anything doesn't let the float bowl fill up properly, the engine won't run right. But you have a different symptom, so that's not Dale's problem. We have another video on fixing a 2-stroke carburetor, and if you were to look at that, that one had a problem with the float assembly. So you might want to look at that as well. It's 2-stroke, but the carburetors, 90% of them are exactly the same. Alright, there we go. So, this is the float bowl. All it really does is hold fuel at a very specific level. You want to take a look at it, make sure it looks clean, because if you had really bad fuel, the sediment will all end up in here, and you want to clean it out. Better to clean it out of here than having to clean it out of there. It's much easier. Okay, the float itself is right here. What's the history of this, Dale?
I have no idea.
Wow. This has had a patch. Somebody has glued a piece, there was a hole in the float, and someone has glued on a piece of plastic to fix the hole.
Well, I hired someone to work on my engine last week, and I guess he probably punched a hole in it.
Yeah, and that just never happens naturally to have to be fixed.
Right.
Also, this is broken right off. This is going to be a problem. Yeah, I have to look into that. Yeah, somebody fixed this without the right tools, and they just kind of beat on it with a hammer. So that's not good, but we'll get it going. I don't think that's our problem, so I'll try not to mess in that area. Now this screw got stripped right the hell out. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get it out, but I have another screw for that. I'm going to go get some vice grips.
Oh boy.
So how long have you had this engine? Is this like an ongoing puzzle?
I've had this engine maybe 4 years, and for 3 of those years this engine started on the 2nd or 3rd pull and ran like a top all the time. Very quiet, very powerful, great engine, loved it. And then in the Bahamas, I think I had some contaminated fuel and ended up with some carb problems. And since then, on a fairly regular basis, you know, it would emerge again, and you know, it was pretty obvious it was carb was the issue. But you know, my understanding of how the carb works, I don't know how the carb works. I mean, I'm looking at all those little tubes and pipes and pieces, and I don't know what they're for. I have a, you know, I know that the gas goes in there, and I try to clean everything out. Sometimes it helps, and sometimes it doesn't. So this time it didn't help, and then I hired somebody to fix it, And it looks like he FUBAR'd.
Yeah. I think he stripped this screw and then couldn't get it tight. Instead of restarting it, he just tried to jam it in with the wrong screwdriver. So that'll be interesting when we put it back together.
And somehow he got a hole in the float.
Yeah. That, I just can't imagine how he would have done. I mean, he probably like put it on something hot.
That's what it looks like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like a soldering iron or something.
Yeah.
But why would he have something like that?
But there's no fuel in it. It's functioning fine, so that's okay. This bothers me more. This broken off piece of brass. I won't try too hard, but I'm going to try to get it out. Because I don't think this is your problem. No, that's jammed right up in there too. Okay, well, let's talk about the carburetor. It rides this way in the engine, but I'm going to turn it upside down. So everything's upside down. There's a bowl of fuel, and the bowl of fuel has to be kept at a very, very, very consistent level. Like you could draw a line, and fuel must go to here. And how that happens is this float is in here. And remember, it's upside down, so when there's low fuel, the float is in this position, and when there's high fuel, it's in this position, and it tries to just keep it right there. All it really does is goes up and down, and it levers this little thing. This is just a little valve, and when it's pushed down, no fuel can flow, and when it's lifted up, fuel can flow. So when the float says more fuel, the little valve comes out, squirts more fuel. As soon as there's enough fuel, it goes in, and it just keeps playing that game, holding the fuel right at the level it should be. If that's messed up, you either have an engine that just doesn't run at all, there's no fuel, you can't even smell fuel, and that's because this little needle thing got stuck in the down position. Or what's really common is a little piece of gunge gets in it so that it can't close. And then when you run the engine, they'll usually start, but then they die right away, they flood out, and then fuel usually pours right out of the vents because it just is always getting fuel. Now, once you have that fuel at that proper level, again, I'm turning it upside down, the main fuel driving the engine, the main circuit, is this little guy here. And this is called a jet, and it has a very, very specific size hole in it. If you change the jet and you put one with a larger hole, it would supply more fuel, and one with a smaller would provide less fuel. But that's what meters everything. Well, in there's that little hole I mentioned, and it's got to be absolutely clean, because if it's dirty, that means less fuel. It's a smaller hole. That is really mostly used for the high-speed circuit. And what actually is happening, this is the choke plate, and behind that is the throttle plate. This is what you actually activate when you twist the control. I'm holding them open so we can sort of see. A little hard to see. But if you look in there, you'll see that it gets narrow and then it gets wide again. The tube actually, the airflow area goes small and big. Where it goes small, the airflow through the engine is forced to accelerate. And it's called Bernoulli's principle, but when you make air accelerate, its pressure goes down. So you got that area with low pressure. You would think the pressure would go up. You're squeezing it, you would think it would cause back pressure, but it actually makes low pressure. And that area of low pressure sucks fuel up. And the beauty of it, once they built the carburetor right, is if you close the throttle plate, you'll have less air, less low pressure, less fuel. And as you save more and more and more and more air, you end up with more and more and more fuel. Keeps everything in balance. That circuit, that just tube with a little hole, is really only used from about half throttle up. And Dale's problem is from half throttle down. So that tells me that's probably not a problem. We got to go a little deeper for that. This thing is like, you only have to make these things close. You don't have to make them not able to ever open again. Maybe. Oh, man. He's actually warped the top plate. if I can't get this plate off, it's very unlikely I'll be able to fix this carburetor.
Careful you don't stab yourself, man.
Yeah, I am pushing hard. Okay, those 2 screws are permanent.
The vice grips, grab it.
I'll try, but don't have a lot to grab. That first screw that I had trouble with, that was stripped out on the bottom that held the float assembly together. Tight means nothing to that. As long as it's in, it's just keeping the float from physically falling off, and it's a flexible, floppy part. There was no reason whatsoever to tighten things so hard. Anybody that understood it. Oh, we got the little move on this one. Good idea, Dale. I hate using vice grips. They ruin metal. But yeah, in this case, they're pretty gunged up.
Gunge is a hard word.
Yeah, probably not the right word.
Cheech.
I'm trying not to say the other.
Cheech?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're pretty
That's
cheech.
Chris' word. Chris's word.
I'm trying not to say the one that starts with an F, which they are as well. Problem is, I need all 4 off, or it's of no use. Okay.
Success.
Nope. Nope. It was just a slip. This has to seal. I'd like to just cut it off and say, well, 3 is enough, but there's a gasket that has to seal. If air goes in, it won't run right. Okay, let's take one more shot at getting this plate off. What I'm going to do is go down and get my Dremel, and we're going to cut a slot, a new slot across the screw this way, just big enough for the screwdriver so that I hopefully can get it out, because the screw is kind of really screwed up there and I can't get purchase anymore. We'll take a shot. It's not going to be a slam dunk, obvious will work kind of a situation, but we'll try it. So let me go get my tools.
I need my seismic oscillator tool next.
That's what I was going to say. What's the surgeon word for drum?
I think carburetors are under $200, and they're not terribly heavy, and you need a new carburetor.
Yeah.
Get it to Hatsu. It'll be the same damn carburetor, but it'll be cheaper probably. And I have found before Defender has good prices for carburetors.
Okay.
Okay, so what we got going on here is someone gorillaed these screws right in really, really, really hard, and they've stripped the slots. So as a last shot here, I'm going to use a Dremel and I'm going to try to cut a new slot right across that direction, and hopefully get enough purchase with the screwdriver to get it out. Let me just look at one thing before I do that. Okay, so it's going to go in this way, and it needs to turn that way to undo. So I need to undercut in that direction and undercut in that direction. Actually, maybe I can just sharpen the ones that exist first. Let's try that trick first. The screwdriver handle is slipping, it's so tight. But it's not stripping on the screw anymore.
That's good.
Okay. Okay, lean on in there, Dale. Let's work on this one together. Wait till I say ready. Okay, we only get one real shot here. Okay, go. Stop, stop, stop. Okay, gotta reposition. Well, that's about the amount we put in. Okay, I need to hold this better. go. Stop. Okay, whose idea was this? This was your idea, wasn't it? It's a good idea. Okay. Well, it's definitely coming out now. Whew. Well, that didn't make life cooler.
That was a good idea to sharpen the slot.
Honestly, it worked better than I hoped it would. But it was a lot less work and less prone to failure than just cutting a new slot.
Yay!
Okay, so now we have access. Take this little gasket off here. Give that a clean up. But this is all the low speed idle part of the carburetor up here. And the fuel comes up through, I don't know, one of these holes. I forget which one. It's metered on its own jet, but it's underneath this thing we can't get to. So we have to hope that that's not plugged up. I'm going to insert this little bit in here because Dale's carburetor, one of these, actually this one, was like seized right up and we couldn't get it off. Somebody had broken it off. So I couldn't show you what's in this section. So I'm going to show you on this carburetor. It's similar. This is off a 10 horse. His is off 15. They're a little bit different here, but they do roughly the same thing. Okay, on this carburetor over here was the main jet. And then that little piece of brass you see there is just a tube that goes up that sends the main fuel right through the venturi, like I said. There's also a little hole between the two, and fuel can go over here. And then if you look in there, that's like a secondary jet. And I don't think this one comes out. Yeah, this one doesn't come out. It's just corroded up. But that little jet in there needs to be clear as well. It's part of the low speed. It could cause the same symptom that we had. And you need to clear that out. And I either take a piece of wire. I use guitar string wire. Or you can blast it with goo, you know, carburetor cleaner, or a little of both. And it's important to get that cleared. Another way you can tell, if you can get it out, it's really easy. You can just blow through it. But usually you can manage something with blowing through it that way. Blowing through, looking through, your eyes and your sense of pressure in your mouth is way more sensitive than any other way to tell if it's good or not. So if you blow through it and it feels plugged and then all of a sudden it's like a pea shooter, now you can actually blow some air through it, this should be much rejoicing. You probably just found your problem. Anyway, I just want to show you that part that we can't show you there. It's just two jets. Jets are just plugs with little tiny holes, and that's all. The fuel comes up through, I don't know, one of these holes. I forget which one. It's metered on its own jet, but it's underneath this thing we can't get to. So we have to hope that that's not plugged up. Comes up that little riser there, I believe, so it'll come to here. And then it goes around this labyrinth and ends up coming out here. And when the throttle plate here is all the way closed, the only real opportunity for the fuel is to go, I think, way up in the front here. And that's metered and controlled with this needle valve. So that part in there has to be scrupulously clean, and that's the smallest passage, and that gets plugged up real easy. And then as you give it more throttle, these little other holes start coming into play. And these other holes you can just clean with a guitar string or blow through them. They all look pretty good. But there is a lot of just crap in here. I'm not too sure where it came from, but it's likely been floating around in the fuel and got caught up in there. This part should be really, really clean. So I'm going to take it forward now. I'm going to spray it with solvent, clean it up as well as I can, paying particular attention to that. I'll squirt in through there too. And then we'll come back here and we reassemble it, put it back on the engine, and hope for the best. Also, hopefully we can reassemble it. I have another carburetor down below, so I think I'm going to steal all the fasteners off and give Dale new fasteners because these are beyond use. Okay, to the bow.
Okay.
Do not get this stuff in your eyes. This stuff is just horrible, horrible solvent. Just said that mostly so I would hear it, so I wouldn't get the stuff in my eyes. I just realized I'm wearing plastic glasses too. All right. Yeah, that was cold. One more here. All right, let's put it back together.
The zippers do get changed.
All right, there's air now.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool to watch someone working on something mechanical without becoming totally enraged. Like in my life, my dad would always get me to come help him when he was working on the car or the snowmobile or whatever. And his default way of interacting with anything mechanical is to become absolutely batshit enraged. He would just be so angry. Even when he started, I mean, even before he started. And then, of course, you start working on these things, there's always something frustrating, right? There's a screw that won't come out, or a bolt that's jammed, or something that doesn't fit, and that would just send him around the corner. And when you were getting that screw out at the end, when you had victory, if it would have been my dad, he would have started talking to it. He would have said, "Oh yeah, you like that, huh? You thought you were gonna, you thought you weren't gonna. Oh, now what are you gonna say? Huh? What are you gonna say now?"
Well, that'll teach it.
Yeah. So that's how I learned. That's how you're supposed to be when you work on things. So whenever I work on engines or anything, it's really hard for me to stay calm and rational and, you know, focus on problem solving and not just lose my shit. And
well,
so it's nice to see such a calm, analytical approach.
Cool. Well, let's hope the carburetor appreciates the difference. If not, I'm going to yell at you.
Yeah, you like that? You want that, huh?
Yeah. I'll throw you in the ocean. It's not like I don't have another one almost like you down below. Let's talk about the needle valve. This is really important. This has already been done to this motor, but when you buy a new motor, they don't want you messing with this needle valve. And when I say they, I mean like the US government. Because if you were to just pull it out a little bit, the thing would run rich. Might run better, but it would run rich and it would pollute ever so slightly more. So to make it have the standard of being a non-polluting engine, they put a brass plug over the hole where the needle valve is. So the first thing you have to do with a new carburetor, first time you have to mess with it at all, is you have to get a drill and drill that brass out. It's really easy to do. Just center your drill real well, use a punch, drill out the brass, drill a hole into it about the right size, and then grab a screwdriver or something and just pry out what's left. And then underneath it, trust me, is a nice metal steel screw, just what you saw me have a minute ago. Now, the first thing you do is you have to say, well, they kind of knew what they were doing, and they set it where it should be. And when I put all this back together, I want to start from their position. So the first thing you do is put your screwdriver in it, paying attention to where it is, and you screw it all the way in gently to the bottom, and you count the number of rotations. And in the case of this one, no, there's the spring. In the case of this one, it was 2 full turns. So what I'm going to do now when I put it back in is I shall take it all the way to the bottom, seat it, and then back it up exactly 2 full turns. And that'll be the starting position for getting the engine going. Later on, when you have it idling, you can tweak with it and get it running just the way you want it. And when I say drill this out, because it's this ecological whatever, it's not wrong to do that. It does not make the engine pollute. any more than it does anyway. It's just that it lets you make it right. And you don't want it to be running rich. If it runs rich, it fouls the spark plugs and just doesn't run very well. You actually just want it to be absolutely perfect. So we're not being ecological demons here by drilling that out. We're actually making the engine run better and cleaner. So that's a half a turn, it's 1 turn, 1.5 turns, 2 turns. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna rush down and get another carburetor to tear apart. I think you already have bits of that carburetor in this one, so we know the threads fit.
So that little brass piece that you drill out, what you're saying is that's your problem right there.
It's definitely in the way to fixing the problem.
He had this year where he was fixing people's fridges and he would just take parts out of them. That's your problem right there. Take that part out.
Yeah, it worked better.
Then you're good.
All right. Yep, it's missing 2 screws. I think I know where they went. Dropped in the ocean, did you, Dale?
I knew you would be back. I was working on this very same Carb back in the Bahamas, cleaning it, and I take it to this little abandoned beach, and I'm, taking little screws out, and I'm thinking to myself, man, maybe I should rig something so if I drop it, it just won't fall in the water and be gone. But I'm like, nah, I'll just be careful. So of course I drop one of the screws in the water. It's one of the screws that's like holding the plate on. And I'm like, oh man, now what? And this little beach was across the bay from Georgetown. So I had a piece of wire in the boat, so I wired the carburetor shut. And actually got to town, go walking in to a place called Top to Bottom, and Top to Bottom is run by this real fire breather of a woman named Freddy, and she has no she doesn't have a lot of patience for stupidity,
And she sees it everywhere.
and she sees it everywhere. That's right. Yeah. So I come walking in there. I said, Freddy, I need a bolt like this. She goes, what's that from?
What did you do?
What did you do? What's that from? I said, well, it's from a carburetor. She goes, well, what happened to the old one? And I'm like, I dropped it in the water. She's like, so she gives me the screw, and as I'm leaving, as I'm leaving, she goes, don't drop that in the water too. And I'm like, ha ha ha, I won't. So I go walking back to the dock, and I drop it in the water. So now I have to go walking back, and I go walking in the store, and already sitting on the counter is the screw. And she looks at me, she goes, I knew you'd be back. Oh, she's awesome. We both, Kris and I both love Freddy.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen people take a rain umbrella and float it in the water, hang it so you
Yeah. It's a great idea, but I'll just be careful.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, I'll be careful.
Also, there's no washers anymore. These little aqua washers. I'm not a huge fan of them, but things like this is good because they kind of are a torque device. They're like springs, so you don't have to do it super tight. They kind of keep everything closed. But along the line, somehow it's lost its washers as well. Okay, so nice new screws. All right. Okay, so now we take the needle valve. We put it on its little clippy thing here, so it hangs, and then put this in. And this whole float assembly, it's just absolutely, let's steal the new screw from, or the old screw from this one.
So when I buy a new carburetor,
Yep.
I'll give you the old one since it's mostly yours anyway.
Somebody will benefit if you do. This is the one they had in there. It should have been a pan head like this. I think they lost your screw and just had another screw that wasn't exactly right and then had to force it in. Or maybe it's just different on this one, but let's just check. All right. And now, when you do, oh, you got to put it all together. I can do that. You want to talk about that yet? All right. So this goes here. Okay, I used the last two new ones I've got.
Man, it's amazing. You can buy something so complicated for 200 bucks.
Yeah, I don't even think they cost that. They've got manufacturing right down. Okay, maybe I can do that with a flat. These two look okay. Okay, finally. All right, now whenever you work on a carburetor, before you put it on the engine, because the biggest thing that can get screwed up by taking this apart and putting it back together is that float can get bound up. And you put it all on, which is not easy, and it involves dropping bits in the ocean and getting new ones from Freddy. And then you take it off again and clear it. So you can test that very easily. Now when it's right side up, the float is down saying, give me fuel. So if I blow into this tube, which is where the fuel goes in, I should be able to blow in. And I can. Now if I turn it upside down, the float just fell, and it should be blocking off, so I shouldn't be able to blow in. And I cannot. So we know the float is working because we got to screw with gravity instead of buoyancy. Same thing. Always, always do that test. It probably will only fail 10% of the time, but that 10th time you'll be so happy you did it. It's easier to take it apart here now. All right, Dale. I think that's worth a shot.
All right.
I don't know if it's going to work, but it's worth a shot. Problem with the low speed stuff is you got to just have it scrupulously clean, and we weren't able to clean the bottom. I did spray some fluid through it, but I don't think the problem was the bottom. I think the problem was the top. Here you go, man.
I present to thee. Oops. I'll drop that in the water.
Gasket in place.
Guess this is where we find out if this is going to be a good video or not.
Yeah. Squeeze the bulb first, of course, because we take all the fuel out of it. So we need to fill that up. And you can learn a lot by squeezing this bulb. It feels like it squeezes real easy, and then it'll get to the point where that float came up, and it should pretty much stop. You should be able to picture and feel that it's working. Are you? Does it work?
Well, guess we're going to find out.
Well, we know what that other hose is. That's primer. Shouldn't really need that. Adjust that little valve, that needle that I was messing with, because I got it more or less right. What you do is you take this, you got to turn the engine and look in there. And you want to tighten. If you loosen it up, it's richer. If you tighten it down, it's leaner.
So we want looser, it sounds like.
Well, what you want to do is loosen it a little bit and then tighten it up until the engine will go faster, 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 stall. Then you back it up a little bit where it was running as fast as it can.
Okay, I think you should come and do this.
Okay, when you do this, you want to make sure you don't bump the linkage, because it'll rev it up. There it is. Yeah, it sounds right to me. Is this low enough for you to be able to shift? Or is it revving too high to shift?
Oh, I can shift.
Okay, you happy? I can slow it down.
No, I'm happy.
Okay, well, let's put the cowling on and give it a little test.
Okay.
Kind of tested already.
Yeah.
It didn't stall.
Didn't stall.
It's gonna work?
I think it's going to work. I think we got it. If I was him, I'd replace that carburetor. Somebody really messed with it. It's going to run good, but the next time it needs to be fixed, it's probably going to be problematic. So, we had an engine here that wasn't running at low speeds, and it was leaning out. That means too much air for the amount of fuel it had. So, we cleaned up the fuel passages and tried to make the fuel passages better, and we fixed the problem. But let me talk about another thing that can cause that same problem. So it can be because fuel can't get to the carburetor or to the engine, but it also can be because too much air is getting. And what happens sometime is this gasket back here, if you don't get this right and air is leaking in through here, it'll have exactly the same symptom because there's more air than the carburetor knows about, so there's the fuel mixture is all off. So if you have the same problem, check both of those things. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. You know, do all the nice things so other people know about the video. Click the thumbs up, subscribe to us. If it really helped you, go to Patreon and give us some money. Buy us a beer.
I owe you guys dinner. So, I guess the choice would be, do you want to come over to our place for dinner, or do you want to get taken out?
Your place. You're better cook than everybody else.
All right, and do you have a request for what you'd like?
Haven't had ribs in a while. Are they
Ribs?
available here?
Oh.
This is the island to buy ribs on. I'm
This
sure
is
they
the
cost
island to
very
buy
little
ribs.
and they're very good.
We'll have a rib dinner soon. Yes.
Quickly though, before the engine fails.
Wonderful!
Didn't even need the joke.
Woohoo!
See you guys.
See you later!
That was another happy customer.